Hello, everyone. Welcome. You're listening to 27 Degrees Sag, and that happens to be the center from the galactic universe. I'm your host, Kim Lalo. I'm a certified astrologer in Western and Chinese. I'm a psychic medium and a feng shui consultant. We're here tonight. I am so excited to bring you my guest this evening. He's an amazing, talented, spiritual, I want to say just an accomplisher in life. He's not only the founder of the World Tai Chi Day, but he also is an amazing author. And he's here to kind of guide you into how spirituality and science may make a little bit of a tapestry, a little bit of a wonderful weave that you can understand in a knowingness. He's the author of the new second edition of the Gospel of Science, and he has this unbelievable view of just the word of transformation. And that goes from just being a major, human to being a major human. And for each and every one of us to kind of tune in to how William Douglas does it, to how we may be able to make our own path according to a little bit of tips of the trade. I want to welcome you. Put your hands together this evening, and I'm going to call him Bill all night long. So put your hands together for Bill Douglas. Welcome, Bill. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And it's one of those nights tonight in the astro world. We've got the moon in Virgo, so we're all about the details. We're all about the teaching. We're all about the learning. We're all about coming from a self-sacrificing avenue this evening. We are also under this huge, I want to say, force of Jupiter, the planet of expansion, connecting to or conjuncting to the creative planet of Neptune. And Neptune literally is the planet of artistry. It's the planet of the musicians, the dancers, the poets, the writers, the people who probably have had many reincarnations from the planet Venus. But Neptune is in Pisces right now, which rules the element of water. And when we talk about water, we must talk about something that we really need to kind of really take a look at again, which would be the water within the body, which would be infection, because it would be the sinuses, the throat activity that usually ends up in the lungs. So when I see that this expansion again, and they're labeling it, of course, as a return of COVID, is no surprise. But there are so many other aspects beyond COVID that needs to, really be celebrated. And that's the creative spark within each of us. Even if we just write, or paint little stick men, there's a creative force within us that this particular Jupiter influence is going to bring this out front and center. It's also going to bring out a lot of emotions, a lot of vulnerability, a lot of compassion. It's going to bring out the feeling of we are all in this together. And that is a universal quality that keeps coming up time and time again. So we have this wonderful highlight and this wonderful flavor coming to us tonight on the show. And I want to say thank you so much for everybody coming into the chat room right now. If you are listening and you want to be a part of it and you want to ask Mr. Bill these wonderful questions, or perhaps just comment, or you need to ask me a question, come on over to youtube.com and join in the super chat room. And we're going to get some conversations going here. Right now, I want to say hi to Mr. Bill Lowe, and Sheila's in the chat room. And also, we've got Carla and we've got Sheena. And we've got Liana, and we also have Kyla. And I think Kyla has a birthday coming up. So happy birthday to you as well. So, Bill, I need to know, how did you begin your spiritual journey?
Well, yeah, it didn't start off that way. I mean, when I was a kid, my parents had me in Sunday school and Bible school and, all those kind of things. But I was looking for answers, and there were so many questions that that they couldn't answer, and so and then I became a teenager and drifted away from all this, all that kind of thing, and what happened? My father, we grew up. I grew up in a PTSD household. My father was in 3 years of frontline combat in World War II. And his division was actually famous because they were the division that liberated the Dachau death camp. And so I grew up, in a PTSD household. And then, it was the 70s. So when I got to high school, we were all just self-medicating, right? And so that was my solution. And that worked great up until the point where in my early 20s, I had kids. And once we had kids, you can't party all the time. And so that kind of what it did was at one point it drove me to seek counseling. And so I just flipped through the yellow pages. We were living in the LA basin in California at the time. And I just flipped through the yellow pages and I found a counselor. His name was Duke. I can't remember what his last name was, but this is like 40 something years ago. And anyway, Duke, he had been working with, in the daytime, he worked in the VA with veterans that were dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And so he realized very quickly that part of what was going on with me was post-traumatic stress disorder from my father's PTSD.
Yeah.
And yeah, because it's a raucous experience growing up in a household where some guy's been in 3 years of frontline combat. And so anyway, it was Duke that ended up recommending mind-body practices. And so that led me to a meditation Tai Chi class. And man, that first night, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't, I'd never done anything like that before. And that first night, it was just awesome. It was just like I felt clear. I felt connected. I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel urgent. And like I said, when I walked out of the class, I just felt like I was connected to everything, the palm trees, the sky, everything. And I'd felt alienated from everything prior to that. And so that really, zipped me in my brain. But then I had challenges with meditation. Your mind wanders and then you start scolding yourself because your mind's wandering and you start thinking you're a horrible meditator. You go through all these stages. And so anyway, so that launched me, kind of down a mind-body path. And I really embraced it. I started going to, Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga or meditation classes, almost every night, for a period. I had classes, almost every night during the week. And so I really threw myself into it for a while. But then I got distracted from it, just life, things that were going on in life. And, and I didn't stick with it. It just kind of fell to the wayside. But then I went through a series of really catastrophic life experiences. Within a little more than a year, my mother passed away. And then my father passed away a few months later. And then my youngest son went into a coma and passed away a few months after that.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, what I did initially was I just crawled inside a bottle. It was just too much. I didn't see, any point.
Thank God for the bottle sometimes. I have to, my personal So I have to say, thank God there was a bottle there, really, or we wouldn't be here. And
it,
that's the truth, Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
Yeah.
There are times there, when everything's just so overwhelming.
Right.
And, but at some point, I guess I just got tired of being depressed and tired of drinking, all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so I had an epiphany, and I just decided, I didn't want to go out this way. And, and it was a good thing I found that out, because I had hepatitis C. I'd gotten hepatitis C in high school, from,
Oh,
using dirty needles. It was the 70s, it's
right.
all that stuff.
Right.
And anyway, I recovered from it, as a teenager. And then I just completely forgot that I had it. I didn't really realize what it was, or anything like that. But then later on in life, I would, it would come and hit me in the face really hard. And so it's really fortunate that I had that epiphany, and I decided to, kind of clean up my act. And so I started running, I started jogging, I threw myself back into Tai Chi and meditation. And I just spelled it. I turned off the TV. I turned off, I canceled my newspaper subscription. I just turned away from all the, all the turmoil in the world. And I just went back to nature, and I just spent, all my time, just trying to clear my head. And, and it was a difficult period. I mean,
Sorry about
and I would just have, regrets and, things that come up, when you don't have distractions, it's like these old things, and when you go through losing 3 people, you have a lot of regrets anyway, especially a child. It's really,
Oh my God.
yeah,
That just tears you up and turns you inside out.
oh yeah, yeah, because you can always think of a million different ways that you could have done every little thing that would have been way better than the way that you did it, And so all that stuff came up, and I wept, and I went through all those things. And then one night I did something that I hadn't done since I was a little kid, since I was back in Sunday school and all that kind of stuff. And I just got down on my knees before I went to bed, and I just said, I need to know why we're here. I said, I don't get it. I said, I'm not getting it at all. Why are we here? I said, I need to know. And so anyway, then I lay down in bed and I started meditating, and I fell asleep meditating. And in the middle of the night, I remember it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I looked over at the clock, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, I wasn't in bed. I was sitting upright on the end of my bed. And I have no idea how I got from my feeling is, looking back, that I was having an out of body experience is what was happening.
Right. Yeah.
If I would have turned around and looked, I probably would have seen my body laying there asleep in bed. Right.
Right.
But I'm sitting there, and there was this, I don't want to say voice, because it wasn't verbal, but it was just as clear. It was more clear than a voice. It was this clear communication, and I couldn't see this being or this person or whatever it was. But I knew that I knew that they were there. I knew this intelligence was there, this beingness. And anyway, it said, it was like a direct answer to, what I'd been asking for. I realize now. At the time, it was just all happening. I didn't know what was happening. But anyway, it said, I'm about to show you what life could be like. And it touched me right in the center of my brain. And this light just expanded. And then it touched me right in the center of my heart. And then the same thing happened. And this light just expanded. And then all of a sudden, I was just seeing the ceiling of my bedroom just rushing at me. And then I saw the slats in the attic. And then all of a sudden I was looking down at my house in Huntington Beach, California, and it was shrinking, and I could see the California coastline. And then all of a sudden the planet was Earth was way down there, and the moon was off to my left. And I had, and it was the wildest experience. It was like I could feel everybody and everything. And the thing that it left me with, or one of the big things that it left me with, was this realization that we're all going through the same things. We all have the same fears. We all have the same doubts. We're all worried about, our parents or our kids or our brother or sister or, our jobs or, whatever it is that we're going through. And it just was so crystallinely clear to me from that experience that we're all going through the same things. And I ended up writing about it. I'd never been a writer. I was a shipping clerk at the time. And But anyway, after that experience happened that night, I got up in the middle of the night. I knew I couldn't go back to sleep, and I was just thinking, what am I going to do? For waiting for the morning to go to work. And I looked over, and there was a piece of paper and a pen, and it was like this same being or this intelligence that said write. And so I just started writing, like what had happened to me, and just thoughts, feelings that were coming through. And it became an obsession. I was just writing constantly. And then I got to the point where I just thought, this is stupid. I mean, why am I doing this? It's not going to make any difference in the world. What would I ever do with this stuff? I was a shipping clerk. And and so I was going to, when I came home from work that night, when I was driving home from work on the 405 freeway, I just had
made 405.
The 405.
Yeah. The good old 405. Yeah, I know well.
Yeah, it's a whole parallel universe.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So I was driving home, and I just, all this stuff was coming up in my head, about how stupid it is that I'm just spending all my time writing. And by that time, I had a big old stack of stuff that I'd written on my desk, and that nobody had ever seen but me. And there were basically three components of what I'd been writing. I hadn't planned it. It just came out that way. But one was a lot of poetry, and I had never been a poet. I'd never written poetry before, but I was just, poems were just coming. And then the other thing was I was writing a lot of stories about what people are going through, just different people, just things that we're going through, that are universal and common to us all, but they were like individual stories that were coming through to me. And then the third thing was that I was writing a lot of stories about children's innocent wisdom and how important it is for the planet at this time in human history to honor that innocent wisdom.
Wow.
And so I was coming home from work, and I just decided, I'm just gonna stop doing this. This is crazy. And so my plan was to come home, change clothes, go to the local sports bar, and just order an endless supply of ice cold schooners of beer. And and I was just going to forget about all this stuff. Right. And then right before I left to go to the bar, the phone rang, and I wasn't going to answer it. And then, I don't know, a voice said, answer it before you go. So I went and answered it, and it was my sister, and she was calling from Kansas. And that was really strange because she had never called. The whole time that we'd been living in California, I'd never gotten a call from her. And anyway, it was such a weird conversation because I tried to chit chat, and she just wouldn't have any of it. It was like she had a purpose for calling, and she just blurted out. She said, "Mom came to me in a dream last night, and she told me that I need to talk to you about it." And so this was strange because, like I said, my mother had passed away a few months before. So I said, "Well, what?" And she said, "Well, she came to me in a dream, and she took me into a pure white room. And in the center of the white room was a stack of white papers. And she started flipping through the papers, and she said, 'Look what Junior's been doing.'" And that's what they called me, was Junior. And man, my knees like started shaking. I was thinking, wow, I was thinking, this is cool. My mom has been seeing, because I was doubting everything that I was dealing, all this new stuff that was coming through me. Because we do, we always doubt new things when they start to come through.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the world doesn't really support it, and so anyway, so then, it was like I didn't want to ask her what was on the papers because I like the idea of my mom watching what I'd been doing. And so I didn't want to screw it up. And I thought, well, if I ask her and then she doesn't know, she doesn't know or she's wrong about what I've been writing or whatever, then that would be a big bummer. But I had to ask her. I'm just that way. It's like when I was in Sunday school, I was looking for answers. I'm always trying to figure things out. And so I asked her, I said, "Well, what was on the papers?" And she goes, "I don't know." She goes, "There was so much stuff." And then she goes, "Wait a minute." She goes, "I remember that there was a lot of poetry. There was a lot of poems." And so that, hooked me. And then she said, and I remember there was a lot of stories about just what people are going through, what different people are going through. Right. And then she said, and then I remember that there were also a lot of stories about children's innocent wisdom and what it offers the world. And man, at this time, my knees are just like, it's like I had to grab the bed. It was like I couldn't stand up.
Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't go to the bar that night. I kept writing. And, that's 6 books ago.
Wow. So your sister was a validator that
Yeah.
came through with your mom. That's
Right.
her encouragement. And it sounds to me like you had a very strong-handed, uh, either an archangel by your side or a guardian angel or some kind of a force by your side that really said, no, we're going to keep you on the straight and narrow now.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, not that I not that I've been on the straight and narrow for 40 years. It's like I ride the roller coaster that everybody rides. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes we all need to take a break and be human, and really feel the depths of our souls,
Mhm.
and and not really champion the Wheaties box every morning.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
okay, and it's okay, and
Mhm.
it's okay because we come to enlightenment through waves, and everything is a wave of energy. And when you understand how waves of energy come at you this way and then they come up this way, and that's what weaves this wonderful being of life as we know it. And it's like, I feel these waves of it, whether it's creativity or grief or whatever that is. And then all of a sudden, waves come up like this, and it
Mhm.
lifts you, and it lifts you, and it comes down. And the only thing that I can say is, if you've ever been on the ocean or you've been boating, or for me, surfing, you know, and also when you're up in the air and you are in a glider and you're riding the thermals, you get what that energy is, and it keeps taking you, just like if you watch a bird, it keeps taking you higher and higher. And if there's something that you need or want for survival, goes down, picks up a fish, it comes back up. You know,
Yeah.
it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to witness. But
Well,
ourselves, we don't get to witness that.
mhm.
We don't get to see what we're doing as far as catching the waves of energy. And
Mhm.
so we're always constantly criticizing or critiquing, our emotional biorhythms. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned surfing because, I'm a Kansas boy. I grew up in Western Kansas. But after I met my wife, she was from Hong Kong, and so we got married while we were in college. And after she graduated, she was a couple of years ahead of me, and so after she graduated, she came home from class, and she said we have to leave. She said we have to move somewhere where they have real Chinese food. She said I can't stand this. And so she said, I want to move to Los Angeles. And so, I was all for it. I grew up, California was where everything was happening, and so, we
Yeah.
packed up the car and moved to California. And at some point I ended up learning how to body surf. And man,
Oh, yeah, yeah. There you
that
go.
that feeling. Well, the first time I saw the ocean, it was like I didn't even realize it was the ocean. It looked so bizarre. I was telling my wife, I said, where's the ocean? I thought we'd be there by now because we were driving down Beach Boulevard. And she said, well, there it is. And I said, where? And she pointed at it. And I was like, I couldn't conceive of it. It looked like a hill, and the waves looked like tufts of grass. I was putting it in my Kansas brain, I guess.
Spring, right, right. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, at some point I ended up learning how to body surf. And man, that feeling when that wave picks you,
When you catch
picks
that
you,
wave,
yeah. And all of a sudden you're just flying. You're just flying, and
flying.
you have this force behind you. And it was the most extraordinary thing. But the depth and the breadth of the ocean, it frightened me, as a Kansas boy. And and so I remember when I first started body surfing, when I would start to get, taken into the wave, where I wasn't riding it anymore, but I was getting taken into it. It was like what I would do is I would stiffen up. I would stiffen up and brace, so, because I'd be, ready for it to slam me into the sand. And then what happens when you stiffen up and brace is, man, it just takes you and it drives you into the sand, and you wake up, or you come up with like sand in your mouth and sand in your pants, and all that kind of stuff. And then what you start to figure out over time, if you stick with it, is that when the wave takes you, you have to just completely let go.
Oh,
You have to just let go. And
no.
if you let go, it'll roll you. It'll take you on a ride, but
Yeah.
but you don't get hurt. You don't get driven into the sand. You only get driven into the sand when you tighten and you resist. And so
Yeah.
that really resonates with what you were talking about, about the waves of energy and waves of consciousness, and I think that one of the biggest problems that we have in society, in global society right now, is that we have this, we've kind of been fed this delusion that in order to have, an extraordinary consciousness experience, or an extraordinary experience, that could change our lives and change the lives of people around us, and I think we get these insights all the time. But society kind of somehow gave us the impression that you're not allowed to have experiences like that unless you're Jesus. You know what I mean? And to be honest with you, I don't even think Jesus was Jesus, because I mean, we know he, the stories they tell you, he had doubt, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And temptation, all the things that we deal with. And so I think that's one of the biggest myths that we have to blow away, is that you have to be Jesus in order to, qualify to meditate, or qualify to have expansive consciousness experiences, because everybody's having them all the time, but we suppress them. And society tells us that we're not worthy. Or if we do have them and we talk about them, then they tell us that we're, that we just made it all up. And really, that was what led to my 40 years of collecting science on all this stuff, so that we could say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm not the only one that's having these experiences. And there's science that is backing up how this is possible.
Yeah, let's get to that. Let's get to the science end of it. So many people either come from one spiritual side, or they come from the science side. So, when you have this wonderful book coming out, the new second edition of the Gospel of Science. So, talk to me about this marriage, about this interlocking theme. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, I guess, really thinking back on all this, I think this 40-year journey, what I've been doing is collecting science on consciousness, mind-body practices, the big five: yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, and mindfulness. Those are the ones that have a massive amount of science behind them. And I've come to know that because I've been, investigating this. And I think this whole journey for me was an attempt to try to understand what it was that happened to me when I had that extraordinary consciousness experience. And then, once you get into this, you realize that other people are having experiences. We all have, or, most everybody has synchronicities, where just that right thing happens right at that right time.
Right.
It could be just as mundane as pulling into a parking lot and that parking space opens right when you pull in, just, but it can also be a phone call, or, just different things that can change your life. But, if our brains are in the rat race all the time, we never notice synchronicities. And so one of the things that are part of some of the science that I have in the book is what behavioral scientists have found is that when we practice regular meditation, we experience more synchronicities. So it's like there's less clutter in the mind, and then we're attuned, and then we notice these things. And so so I think these 40 years for me has just been trying to comprehend these experiences that we have in a way, because I was taught to explain everything with science. And once I started delving into it, it's like the science is just so incredible. And what's amazing is that we're not hearing about this. You're never going to hear about this stuff on, Fox or MSNBC or CNN or PBS or anything, because that's all panic-driven news. I actually get into this in the book. It keeps us in a constant state of panic. And but these kind of experiences are happening to people all over the planet, and there's a good reason for that. It's like there's lots of new information coming through to all of us that will change our lives and change our planet, change our society in really beautiful ways. And the more we can feel comfortable with knowing that we have the ability to have large consciousness experiences, and also knowing that that's okay, and also that science validates it. Uh, One of the things that happened, which just kind of blew my mind, because basically I'm a poor Kansas boy. My father, I think his education ended at 8th grade. And my parents were Okies, like the grapes of wrath. My father actually went to California picking fruit and all that stuff. And so I come from really humble roots. I don't have a college degree. I was a sociology major for a couple of years, but then I dropped out when my wife graduated. And so I don't, I'm not, I'm not somebody who's like some, special accredited human being or anything like that. But one of the things that came out of the extraordinary consciousness experience was me learning how to practice Tai Chi and meditation and Qigong. And so at some point we ended up, through a series of events, kind of almost accidentally, although I don't think it was, because it kind of came in a vision during a meditation, the idea of it, but creating these mass Tai Chi exhibitions all around the planet. And it just caught on like a wildfire. I was going through some old papers that I had, and we announced it. And then just a few months later, that's when we had the first World Tai Chi Day, and it was in countries all over the world. I have newspaper clippings from Italy, Italian newspapers, German newspapers, just Russian newspapers all over. And people were they did this, they all wanted to come out and play Tai Chi together on the same day. And so anyway, it became World Tai Chi Day, and it's in 80 countries now, and it's been recognized by government bodies all over the planet. And all this just blows my mind, because I don't have any fancy degrees, to say that I'm qualified to do anything like this. It's just that, it just all led, touching into consciousness just one thing led to another thing, and we can't see where it's all going. Well, anyway, when I was
hold on for 1 second. For those of you who do not know what Tai Chi is, could you explain to our listeners what is Tai Chi?
Yeah. Everybody's seeing it because it's in commercials and movies and everything. And what it looks like is slow motion kung fu. So it looks like you're doing slow motion kung fu like that. And but it's a traditional Chinese medical practice. It's also a martial art. Although today stress is getting most people, so that's why they're drawn to it. But it's just a real slow, contemplative, mindful way of moving and breathing and visualizing relaxation flowing through you. And the science on this is just profound. I mean, I teach for the University of Kansas Hospital, and we've just seen people, just have just really extraordinary experiences. We had one of the students, cardiologist, was his mind was blown by the progress that he was making since he started doing Tai Chi and meditation. And then Qigong is it's another form of traditional Chinese meditative practice. And you can do it sitting. You can do sitting meditation, or you can do moving Qigong meditations as well. And so Tai Chi and Qigong, they're very closely intertwined. Tai Chi really is kind of a form of Qigong if you do it with visualization and breath work. And and then yoga and meditation and mindfulness, they all have mountains of science behind them. But anyway, so we organized this World Tai Chi Day, and it just spread around the planet just really fast. CNN picked it up. When we had the very first event wasn't World Tai Chi Day, it was just a mass Tai Chi event, and CNN picked it up. And I think that kind of planted into us that we should just call it World Tai Chi Day and invite everybody to do it. And it just took off so fast. And so anyway, it's growing, over 22 years now, I think. And anyway, I was getting ready to publish. I was in the last editing of the new second edition of the Gospel of Science, which compiles all this science on mind body praxis. And in 2007, I had learned about the Global Consciousness Project at Princeton University. And some of your listeners may be familiar with it. But what they found was that human consciousness could affect their computers. So they did research in laboratories, and people could affect the performance of the computers. And so they ended up creating these computers they called random event generators, and they spread them all over the planet. And the first thing that they noticed was that their random event generators went way off course during Princess Diana's funeral. And that was when the whole world was paying attention to that. because, she was very beloved, in a lot of different ways, to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. And so that sent their computers off track. And so they started thinking, wow, it seems like there's like a global vibe when people's consciousness goes into coherent consciousness together. And then other things happen, like the September 11th events. They triggered their computers to go off track. And so anyway, in 2007, after I learned about what they were doing, I contacted them and I said, we organize this World Tai Chi event every year. And I said, could you guys look at your data and see if you notice anything, on that day? And so they said, yeah, we could do that. But anyway, they never got back to me. And so I just assumed, oh, well, we're not that big yet. And it was disappointing. I had high hopes that we were going to have an effect on global consciousness, but it didn't happen. But then at the end of 2021, right before I was getting ready to publish this book, Final Edits, I decided to contact that Princeton University-born research project. And I said, because since we started World Tai Chi Day, there's been other events, similar events that have kind of spawned from that. There's like a World Yoga Day that the United Nations resolution created in 2014, I think. And then there's other, global meditative type events. So I asked him, I said, have you guys seen any of these kind of, global mind-body events that have had some impact on global consciousness? And they got back to me right away this time. And they said, yeah, we've been studying like 100 of these events. And right at the top of the list was World Tai Chi Day.
Yay!
And so that just like blew my mind. I mean, it just seems like a few weeks ago, I was kicking clods down an alley in Ellis, Kansas, trying to find pop bottles so I could go to the movie theater or play some pinball games or something, and I just, how could anything like that ever happen? You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, that was just a real mind blower. And it just made me realize, that it's like, we don't have to be credentialed people. We don't have to be saints.
Right.
We're all extraordinary consciousness. We all are. And this science validates all this stuff. If that was one of the things, as I was writing the book and I rereading this science, it drove me back into spending more time meditating, more time being in nature, more time clearing my consciousness, because because all that science made me show this is not just pretend stuff. This is real stuff that really affects our lives, in really powerful ways.
It's like what we were talking about catching the wave, when you're body surfing, or, when I'm catching a thermal, in the glider, in the air, you catch the wave of consciousness. You catch this, and I want to call it space and time. Mm-hmm. You catch this energy that's going on, that is the unseen energy that now we can talk about. Thank goodness, because when I was a kid and I knew it was happening, I just didn't. I wasn't around the people that I could talk about it to. And so thank goodness for a platform, like YouTube and all of the other shows that we can finally talk about it. Mm-hmm. And we can finally say, yeah, I did the same thing. And it's it's a human experience. And that meditation isn't something that, you have to, I don't know, eat soy and rice only to experience it. And right. That is something that, that there's so many falsehoods and expectations around this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But meditation is the way, the gateway, the portal, the way that you get to that. Mm-hmm. So you connect to that unseen energy wave. Let's just call it that, whether it's time and space or whether it's just consciousness, whatever name you want to put on it. But once you open up and once you catch that, isn't it amazing what comes through and channels to you the information?
Yeah. And in the book, I get into all this. But when we go into the meditative state, it's the alpha theta brainwave state. And the alpha theta brainwave state is that state where, when our consciousness is just kind of drifting, it's like right when we go to sleep, we go through that alpha theta state where we're conscious for a moment, but we're not in control, and we're just kind of drifting. And so it's all measurable. In fact, in my book, I talk about there's a technology called Muse. I don't know if some of you guys might have heard about it, but it's a headband that you get, and then it syncs with your telephone, and it actually detects your brain waves. And so when you're practicing meditation, it'll tell you when you're in alpha state. It'll tell you when you start to go down to, alpha theta state. And then it gives you a report on what percentage of the time you were in alpha state. And so we can actually measure when people go into the state. But the metaphor that I've come to use for that state is, and I get into all this science in the book, but in quantum physics, particles, there's a particle wave conundrum that quantum physicists have had since the very beginning, and it's the particle wave function. And what they found was that when they were observing, they had like a double slit barrier, and then they were shooting photons or other particles through it, and then it would go through, and then there was a detection screen behind. And so when they were watching the laser shoot the particles through, it made two lines because there were two slits, right? So that's what you'd get. You get particles going through, making two lines on the screen behind. But what they found was that when they weren't watching, it didn't behave like particles. It behaved like waves. So like two waves going through the slit, and then behind that was an interference pattern. Like if you threw two pebbles in a pond, and then the ripples would intersect and you'd have an interference pattern. So you had like seven, instead of having two very clear lines, you'd have seven less clear lines because it was wave. It was an interference pattern. And so that was blowing their minds. When we're watching it, they behave very orderly, like particles. But when we're not watching it, they behave like waves. And so there was, all kinds of debate. And today in science, there's this kind of mechanistic religion with a lot of science, and most of the popular culture adheres to this. I don't know why, because it's not really scientific in a quantum world, but they do, and they discount these kind of things, and that's very unfortunate. But this particle wave function is it's a real metaphor for our consciousness, because when we're focused, when we're in left brain, beta brainwave state, I call it busy beta brainwave state. When we're in that normal state that most people are in all the time, we're focused on singular things or singular thoughts or whatever. And so we're like a particle. But when we let go and we go into that alpha theta state, what happens is that particle melts into a wave, and we become a wave in the ocean of existence. And so then that's when we attune. That's when we catch on to things. Because, looking back on World Tai Chi Day, I realized it wasn't really my idea. It was like it came to me and I threw it out there, and I created worldtaichiday.org, the website, and then I worked my butt off, trying to organize it, once I got the idea of it. But, you could work as hard as you can. And if the wave is not there, it's not going to happen. So what I realized, looking back, is that what I was doing was when I was going into those states, I was touching into an ocean where there were a lot of other people around the planet that were kind of having the same idea. Yeah. It's time to get out, kind of take Tai Chi out of the closet and put it out there where everybody can see it. Yeah. And, we've educated, as much as like 1 billion potential media viewers and readers from the media that we've gotten for that. And so I just felt like I just kind of touched into that wave. And now what's exciting, or one of the things that's extremely exciting in this book is that Dr. Dean Radin, who's the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which was started by astronaut Edgar Mitchell, because he had some extraordinary consciousness experience. Oh, he's great.
He's great. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he's great. And so anyway, Dr. Radin, so you have this kind of mechanistic media view of the world, which is not scientifically accurate. And so they discount anything that has anything to do with consciousness, just immediately. They don't look at it. They won't look at the data. They just automatically say, oh, that's stupid, crazy stuff, right? Well, anyway, so Dean Radin, the chief scientist at IONS, he just took this head on. And so what he did was he had people sitting 3 meters away from the laser shooting the particles through. And for 30 seconds, he asked them for 30 seconds to visualize in their mind the slit that the particles were going through, how the particles were going through the slit. And then he would have them rest for 30 seconds. And this would go on for like 20 minutes. And so 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. And they did this with thousands of people. And what they found was that when they were envisioning the particles going through, they behaved more like particles than like waves. So that person's consciousness was actually changing the particle wave behavior. And when we're talking about changing the reality of subatomic particles, we're talking about the whole universe. The whole universe is made out of subatomic particles.
Exactly. And so that's my point. So the point is, Bill, when you blend in, gospel science together, your belief systems and your projection onto just your environment, we literally can change outcomes. Mm-hmm. We can change the energy around us. Mm-hmm. And this leads to changing the so-called timelines that everybody thinks is appropriate for you, mm-hmm. or appropriate endings for the path that you're on. But mm-hmm. literally for all of these predictions of what the world is supposed to do, or, World War III, or mm-hmm. all of this, mm-hmm. exactly what you are describing, each and every one of us, when we concentrate and throw our perceptions into the wave of consciousness, we have the power to change the timeline, to change mm-hmm. the outlook. Mm-hmm. So in your particular project of transformation, have you found this to be a scientific fact?
Yes, right. There was a huge medical study that involved thousands of people, and all this research is meticulously cited in my book with a webpage with live links, because I wanted everybody to have instant access to all this so they could see where I got the information. And there was a huge study, and that went over many years. And what they found was that that perhaps the biggest predictor of people's future health was whether they had a hopeful, positive vision of their future. If they had a hopeful, positive vision of their future, they were many times more likely to have a hopeful, positive future. And yeah, exactly. And so this is true on a personal level. It's like what we keep, rotating around in our minds over and over and over again is true, but it's also true on a societal level and on a global level. And one of the things that happened to me, I told you this 40 years hasn't been, just this angelic experience. It's like it's been life. But I've paid attention. I've paid attention to these things, and I think that makes a big difference. So I encourage everybody to write down your extraordinary consciousness experiences. They may not seem extraordinary at the time, but journal these things. And so one of the things that I get into in the book is that modern media is fear-based, and that came out of a personal experience that I had during the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, like for Tai Chi and Qigong teachers and yoga teachers, and meditation teachers, it just shut us down. I mean, we just completely lost, and I know a lot of Tai Chi teachers, they went out of business. They'd spent their lives creating a Tai Chi practice, and they had to give it up. I mean, they couldn't afford to pay the rent on the studio or whatever. And so, we had the lockdowns. We were all sitting there. We had nothing to do except be fearful. And so I did what a lot of people around the world were doing, and I ended up sitting in front of my television set watching all this urgent fear-based media coming at me, all day long, and and it just fried me. I just got to the point where, it was just so divisive, and it was so it was so depressing, and so urgent, and so apocalyptic, and so I did what happened after I had that extraordinary consciousness experience 40 years ago. And I had now just to kind of put this in perspective with the book, I had written the new second edition of the Gospel of Science over a couple of years, well, 40 years total, but over a couple of years leading up to the pandemic. But then when the pandemic hit, I just, I wasn't meditating. I was just, absorbing all that fear-based media and everything. And then I just had a point where it just all became too much. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up turning off the news. And, I stopped reading, the articles online, and I started spending time outdoors meditating, and also watching other kinds of media. When I did watch media, it's like philosophy, insights into, life. I watched some astrology. I watched a bunch of astrology videos on YouTube because I was just, it's kind of like a Rorschach, it's like you lay the cards out and you talk about, things, and some of it resonates with you and some of it doesn't. So it's kind of like a I Ching. It helps you kind of work through things, and so that was the kind of stuff I was looking for, but largely I was, meditating, doing Tai Chi, yoga, and, trying to spend time outdoors and everything. And so then the clarity started to come back. And then that's when I started working on the book again. And then when I was reading all that science on, the power of mind body practices, then that got me, even more to want to do it. And then that's when I found out that we had changed the planetary consciousness with World Tai Chi Day, because I was doing research for the book. And so, so that was a very recent, kind of a down point in my life, when I was just going through all the fear that everybody was going through, because everybody was all glued to their television sets, and
that's what happens when they send out and bombard everyone, with a specific low frequency.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have your fins up,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have your guard up or your shields up, you're going to get whacked. And and so I think that, and this is bad, but I think that something good always comes out of that. And
Yeah.
that is that we now know that we can protect ourselves. We now know that we don't have to listen to mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
We now know that there are other options out there,
Mm-hmm.
and that your voice needs to be heard.
Right.
And your opinions and your experiences need to be out there, because they're going to sync up with somebody else who links up with somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
who ultimately, that chain of command ultimately moves forward on the front.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not think that you have any creativity whatsoever, or you're not an artist, or you're not a poet, you're not a writer, or you're not anything. And then all of a sudden,
maybe you're a shipping clerk.
Maybe you're a shipping clerk, and all of a sudden, boom, everything comes together for you, and you start making these wonderful strides that the world takes notice, and you are a fabulous example of this. And I commend you for that.
Well, I wanted to bring that through in the book. It's like I wanted to, show people, like I said, you don't have to be Jesus to meditate. You don't have to be Jesus to have insights. It's like, we just, wherever we are, we just process it. But I wanted to show people the power of mind body practices, and, getting that clarity of consciousness. And then also I wanted to dispel this, this kind of group delusion that the world has, that everything's just headed to, the world's just going to hell in a handbasket, because it's just not the case. And one of the things that I get into in the book is the science that shows that compassion is the very core, it's the very fabric of the universe. And one of the studies that I get to in the beginning of the book is they did a research project where they were looking at people's DNA expression. And they had the people practice like selfish hedonistic pleasures, And then they looked at they interviewed them, to see how that made them feel, and then also their DNA. And then they had people practicing altruistic pleasures, where you're doing something for the greater good with no expected payback, just for the joy of, doing it. And both when the people were doing the selfish pleasures and the altruistic pleasures, they both described a very similar high. It was a very similar kind of uplifting experience, psychologically and emotionally. But when they looked at the DNA knew the difference. And when they were when people were getting their pleasures selfishly, the DNA expression was less healthful. There was more inflammation. When they were involved in altruistic pleasures, serving, the greater good or other people or whatever, their DNA healed. Their DNA had less inflammation. And so at our very core, DNA, it shows that we're here, that compassion is the reason that we exist. It's the fabric of the universe. And this carries through, and I get into chaos mathematics and self-replicating reality. And this carries through different levels of society as well. And what we find is that compassionate states, that's when we're on track, and also that's when we're the most healthy. And the Global Consciousness Project out of Princeton, Dr. Roger Nelson, who I quote in the book, and I talk about the science that he did, because he's, that was the one that found out that we had changed global consciousness. And he said that the most exciting thing that he had gotten out of their 20 years of research was that they found was that when people were in healing or compassion states of consciousness, connecting with other people, like World Tai Chi Day or World Yoga Day or World Peace Meditation Day or these kind of things, their consciousness had a more powerful effect on their computers than states of fear and tragedy. And so that's what the media sells us, pretty much 24/7, is fear and tragedy. But the thing is that it's the compassion states of consciousness, which is the fabric of our being, and all the major religions, all the prophets, they said, when you're serving others, that's when you're going to be the most happy. Right. And, because we're not self-obsessed, we're not obsessing over every little thing that's not going right in our lives. We have a bigger picture. And so it changes everything. But Roger Nelson said that that it's measurable. It's measurable. Compassion and healing states of consciousness are more powerful. They more powerfully affect the world out there than states of fear and tragedy. And so that bodes really well for the future. So I wanted to put all this good news in a book so that people would not be, kind of have a distorted reality. Like, for example, one of the things that I get into in the book is that violent crime rates in the United States and in many countries around the world is at a 40-year low. So for 40 years, 40 years, it's been going like this, down. Violent crime rates have been going down. Now, when I mention that in public presentations, people go, "What? That can't be true. I just heard on the news, yesterday, that violent crime rates are going through the roof." Well, yes, they may go up, they go up and down, but the difference is, from here to here, it's 40 years of going down. So a little bit of up is still 40-year lows. And it's not just the United States, it's other countries around the world. And nobody knows why this is happening. But I have a suggestion of why it's happening. The suggestion is that over the last 40 years, mind-body practices have spread around the planet like a wildfire. And the Transcendental Meditation Foundation, they have been doing research for decades. And the most famous one was Washington, D.C. And what they were going to do is bring in 1% of the city's population of high-level meditators. And they said that if we bring in 1% of high-level meditators, it's going to bring the violent crime rates down 20%. And so they went to the Washington, D.C. Police Department. They said, "We want to work with your data department. This is what we're going to do. We're going to bring in 1% of the population, high-level meditators. We're going to bring the violent crime rates down 20%. The police chief laughed and he said, "Yeah," he goes, "they'll do that if we have a blizzard in August," because they were going to do it during the high crime season in August. August is always high crime season. And but anyway, so they were working with local universities and the Washington, D.C. police. And they didn't bring the violent crime rate down 20%. They brought it down 25%. or maybe 23%, but they brought it down more than they said they were going to. And they've replicated this in other studies. And so what happens is when people go into this coherent state of consciousness, just like we did on World Tai Chi Day, it ripples out through the consciousness of the whole planet, or the whole city in the case of these studies. And so they did a larger study with 48 cities, and they brought where they had the meditators, the critical mass meditators, they brought the violent crime rates down, and that remained for 5 years. The cities continued to benefit from that consciousness change for 5 years. So the thing is that we're on the cusp of global transformation, and the book launches the Global Transformation Project, which we can get into if you want to in a bit. But anyway, I wanted to show people. So I chose the word gospel for the title because the Greek root of gospel is good news. That's what gospel means. It means good news.
Right.
So
Good news.
is the good news of science.
Yes.
And so I wanted to change the vision. It's like we got to get people out of this low vibratory, media saturated fear, constant, and I'm old enough to see that there's always another impending end of the world. It just never stops, if you watch the news.
Right. Right.
Well, it's not healthy.
This weaves into exactly what I started the show off of, which was this wonderful Jupiter conjunction to Neptune, and which is expanding the compassion. And what makes us different from any type of AI is the emotional wave. The emotional wave is very difficult to replicate. And that is exactly what we are tapping into when we tap into that compassionate component that is so needed right now on the planet. And when we have this expansive compassion about each and every one of us, what happens is that we bring to the surface the less criticizing and the less expectation, and the more of just appreciating the experience of life, and to really treasure why we are here, why we are in these particular avatars that we are in, and experiencing all of the things we can. However, we are in control, and we are all learning the next step in how to make a difference. We are at the end of the show, Bill. In fact, we've gone over. You are so interesting. Please, can you tell us where we can get the book and where we can get a hold of you and read more about all of you?
Well, if you go to Amazon or any online sellers, they should have it. But you want to make sure that you do a search for new second edition Gospel of Science, because otherwise you'll get the first edition, which has a lot of great science, but there's a lot more in the new second edition. And then also you can check with local independent bookstores as well. If they don't have it, they can probably order it. And also your local library should have it, so you can ask them to order it as well. But I want to get this good news out there, and I hope that everybody will help me do that. Because if we can get the good news out there, it changes the vibratory rate of people's consciousness. And when that happens on a larger scale, it changes the vibratory rate of the whole planet. And the planet that we're headed towards is much more hopeful, much more just pregnant with possibility. But we need to kind of shatter this, this doom and gloom delusion that mass media is basically painting in so many minds. And so I put 40 years into creating this book with all this science meticulously cited and told in a story form like we've been talking about, so that it's entertaining as well as but if you can just and also go to globaltransformationproject.org. We're pushing for United Nations resolution to get mind-body education into public education worldwide. And so send people to there. They can sign a petition that we're going to send to the UN missions around the world. And you can see some of the science on the book as well there. But if you can just get people to, go to the local library and, read the new second edition of the Gospel of Science. I just want to, just get that wave. We can all play a role in that wave shifting. And once it starts to shift, in a direction of reality and truth, things can change really fast in massive ways. Because like I said, the power of healing and compassion and consciousness, the Princeton research, it shows that it's more powerful than fear and tragedy. And the TM Foundation research shows that we can literally change the planet. We are changing the planet as we do things just like what we're doing right now.
We're changing the timeline. We're changing the level of consciousness, and we are changing the future for our children as well. I pulled a couple of cards here real quick. You got the author card, of course you are, and Saint Germain is working with you to help you work your magic. I love that, and also the listen to your intuition card, everybody. So I think for everybody out there, this has been extraordinary conversation this evening. I want to thank you so much, Mr. William Douglas. He is our guest this evening. And if you would like to please push that subscribe button, we're going to bring you more wonderful, inspiring guests on the show. And I am KimlaLowe.com. I'm running a spring fling sale on my sessions, so we can go ahead and talk about what you can do astrologically for your timeline in achieving your goals and your success. All righty, everybody, thank you so much for coming along with us this evening, and my gratitude for each and every one of you who are listening on the archives. I really appreciate it, and if you have gotten something wonderful out of this, please leave a little comment on YouTube. It really helps our channel so that I can bring these wonderful human beings who are doing galactic works right here, right now, and they walk among us. Thank you so much, Bill, for being along with us. And for everybody else, we're going to sign off. May the angels protect you and guide you. Good night, everyone.